Hey everybody, day 3 of NAB. How your feet feel? A little sore. My voice is going, but I think my voice is gonna hold out for this presentation because I'm Robbie and I'm stoked about color and what Adobe is doing with color. Welcome to Think Like an Editor, Work Like a Colorist. How many of you are doing stuff with color today in Premiere Pro? Hands up. Awesome. How many of you are Lumetri color panel users today? I'm going to show you some more reasons to love Lumetri color panel today. My whole passion is color. I'm a professional colorist, and I believe strongly in this quote, that color is a power. It is a power which directly influences the soul. Everything we do as filmmakers, as storytellers, we can enhance with color. Color helps us tell stories, no matter what those stories are. I'm a Lindic author, I'm an Adobe Max master, and as I told you, I'm stoked about color. I stood on this stage a year ago and talked about the new Lumetri color panel, and by that show of hands, a lot of you are using it. Adobe is passionate about color. Doesn't matter if it's just Premiere Pro, After Effects, Media Encoder, whatever tool that you might be using, Adobe is passionate. And it's been an incredible year. Lumetri color is being used on projects of all types and of all sizes. Has anybody used Adobe Capture? Yeah? We can capture and model contrast from the real world and use it as a starting point for our grades in Premiere and other tools. More so, the ecosystem of Premiere Pro is building. Third-party developers are creating some amazing extensions and panels to use in Premiere Pro. Now, today, I want to talk about some awesome enhancements that have been made to the color tools in Premiere Pro. I'm going to start out by showing you some video scope improvements, some things that are a little, kind of small features, but huge in terms of convenience. I'm going to show you a little bit about auto white balancing. How many of you have ever auto white balanced something with a little eyedropper tool, right? Now, this would seem something like Adobe should have had in the Lumetri color panel to begin with. Well, guess what? Now it's here, and it works great, and it's very fast. I'm going to show you probably the most marquee feature of this release, and that is HSL secondary controls. Now, in the Lumetri color panel, you have the ability to make keys. I'm going to show you some new creative LUTs. I'm going to show you something that I'm exceptionally excited about, and that is control surface support, supporting all of the control surfaces from tangent, which is really cool. And I'm also going to show you a little bit more about HDR. HDR is not new in this release, but since HDR is all the buzz everywhere you go in every booth here at NAB, I figured why not touch on HDR and HDR workflows. Now, what am I most excited about? I'm most excited about HSL secondaries. As a professional colorist, the ability to be able to select and isolate a portion of a shot based on hue, saturation, and luminance is something that I do every single day. I can now do it quite easily within the Lumetri color panel. This is a huge workflow thing for refining and perfecting your images. I'm also extremely excited about control surface support. We now have the ability with the entire range of tangent surfaces, including the brand new Ripple. Look how awesome this thing is, right? This is only about $350 US, and it can quickly allow you to get your hands off the mouse and off the keyboard and right to where they should be and focusing on your images. So I want to show you how that works as well. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of third-party extensions. The entire ecosystem around Premiere Pro is growing on a daily basis. Tools like Primal Cut's PDF Viewer, Levels Beyond, Whipster, Frame.io, which I use almost every single day, are allowing us to do things with asset management that we couldn't do before. And this is really exciting that we're able to do these things now directly from Premiere Pro without having to jump to other tools. Okay, so with that said, let me go ahead and jump out into my Premiere Pro project. And I actually want to start up here with one of those third-party extensions or those third-party tools. Do we have any Frame.io users out there right now? Check it out, Frame.io, they're actually down in the red booth. You can check out more about their product. This is a workflow and collaboration tool that I've been using recently. It allows me to interact with clients, post cuts for them, receive comments back from clients. So for example, I'm here in this project. I could literally just hover scrub over this thumbnail. I could double click into it. I could play it, but more importantly, I could even see comments about this particular clip, right? So for example, in this shot, my client, and I'll show you this shot in just a moment, asked me to adjust the green bandana that this woman is working with. I can invite collaborators. I can manage projects without having to go to the web. I can do that all directly here inside of Premiere Pro, and this is a huge workflow tool to me. Now, of course, I can do lots of things in a tool like this. I can right-click on clips, and I can download them. I can even import comments directly to my timeline and sync them up with my timeline. How cool is that? Not only do you not have to go back and look at an email and look at time code, it syncs automatically with your timeline. So there's a lot of really cool stuff with tools like Frame.io, Whipster, and other third-party extensions. Now, I've already gone ahead and moved these clips from Frame.io into my project, and I actually want to start out here on this timeline and show you a couple new things about scopes. Now, this is a pretty cool looking shot. Let me get it a little bigger for you so you can see it. I'll play it. Right? Who doesn't like flamethrowers, right? That's pretty fun. Now, this is an HDR clip. HDR, high dynamic range, allows me to access additional brightness information and additional dynamic range in a shot. Well, Adobe has support for HDR workflows. So that support starts over here on the Lumetri Scopes. Lumetri Scopes were announced last year. They're much higher resolution real-time scopes than we had in previous versions of Premiere. And one of the new features that I can do now, if I right-click on these scopes, I can actually go ahead and I can adjust the brightness of the scopes. Seems like a little small kind of feature, which it is. But from a workflow standpoint of view, if you're in a dark color suite, being able to quickly adjust the brightness of your scope so you can see what you want to see without being distracted, no problem. So if I go to bright here, there you go, I now have bright scopes. I can also work with different color spaces now. 601 for SD work, 709 for HD work, and of course Rec 2020 for digital cinema work as well as HDR work. But that's not the really cool thing about the scopes. I'm going to change my scopes over to work from float to HDR. Now, when I do that, check out what happens over here on the left-hand side with this scale right here. No longer does it say a digital bit value. No longer does it say an IRE value. This is listed in numbers like 100, 1,000, 10,000. These are nits. This is a measurement of brightness that everybody who's associated with HDR might know. But this allows us to have a true one-to-one relationship with what we're seeing on the waveform versus the monitor light output. So on this shot, when I go into one of these flames right here that look totally crazy, blown out and bright, I can see very easily, yeah, that's right around 1,000 nits on my scope. A really useful way of being able to visualize brightness information there. Now, of course, the Lumetri color panel can also work in an HDR mode. Here's how you do that. Up here in the upper right-hand corner on the Lumetri color panel, on the panel menu, if I come down and turn on high dynamic range, let me zoom back out, and then say, for example, come into my basic correction section, what I can do here is I can say, hey, I want HDR white to be this value and above, sort of setting a threshold for your HDR white controls. But further down, you can do things like, hey, you know what? I want to adjust my HDR specular highlights. That's all that really bright stuff. So I can do that really easily too. You'll see as I brighten that up, I could go all the way up to near the theoretical limit of 10,000 nits, which is exceptionally bright. But this is really cool because now, directly in your NLE, you have the ability to work, color correct, and manage HDR footage, right? That's pretty neat. Okay, one more thing I want to mention about HDR is not everybody has HDR televisions. Not everybody has an HDR workflow. Can you repurpose that material? Of course. So if I come down to my effects controls panel down here, I'm going to go ahead and search for SDR, standard dynamic range. And I'm simply going to take that SDR effect, drag it onto this clip, and just like that, of course I can tweak that if I want, but just like that, I now have sort of a backwards compatible workflow where I can take my HDR material and work within an SDR deliverable or an SDR output. Pretty cool, right? All right. Let's jump ahead and go to this timeline. And I want to show you a couple things here. You know, one of the things about being a colorist is that I spend a lot of my time adjusting white balance. It might be that somebody just kind of forgot to white balance the camera. That never happens to anybody, right? It might be that I'm doing this for stylistic reasons. I want to warm up a shot or I want to cool up a shot. Now, in this particular shot, I think you would agree that it's not egregious, but it's slightly cool, right? Now, in the previous release, when the Lumetri color panel was announced, up here in the basic correction section, let me turn off HDR. There we go. I have always had temperature and tint sliders, which, to be honest with you, is pretty simple. Make something warmer, make something cooler, adjust the tint. But a lot of you asked for the ability just to choose something that was neutral in a shot. How many of you are using chip charts? Anybody use a chip chart? Yeah. That makes it an easy way to white balance your shot. Literally hold up a chip chart, choose that white chip, and you're balanced, right? Well, we can do this easily now with the white balance selector right in the Lumetri color panel. So I'm going to go ahead and select that little white eyedropper, and I'm going to come over here to this little A sign right there and click. And just like that, you can see that I have a much more neutral shot, much more warm shot, and the correction has automatically been made for me. If you didn't like the auto selection, no problem. You can go back, of course, and tweak this. But that makes life a lot easier for a lot of people who just need to work really fast and really quickly. And after all, that's what the Lumetri color panel does. It brings the power of heavy-duty color correction tools to editors who are working on all sorts of different projects. All right, let's go down to this next shot. This shot of this guy Sam walking. And I want to talk about probably, if I'm honest with you, probably my favorite feature in this release that is going to allow you to work extremely fast. You know what I really am not a big fan of? Mice, keyboards, right? As a colorist, I want to be able to focus on my images. And the second that I'm looking for a slider, or the second that I'm looking for a button, I feel like I become a little less efficient, right? And I want to be able to focus on making my shots great. Well, that's where a color control surface comes into play. Premiere Pro now supports the entire range of control surfaces from tangent. So the very modular tangent element, the tangent wave, which is ultra portable, and then the brand new ripple, which you can see fits on your desk perfectly, connects to your computer via a single USB cable, and makes life much faster. So a couple things this can do. I'm going to step away from the computer so you can trust me that I'm not actually using the mouse or the keyboard, right? First thing I'm going to do is use the control surface to navigate my timeline. And here's how I'm going to do that. I'm simply going to hold down the A button here and then use my scroll wheel. And I can quickly jog and shuttle the timeline, right, without ever having to touch the keyboard or the mouse, hit the play button, JKL, any of that kind of stuff. I can do it directly from the timeline. Now, of course, the other thing that the control surface allows you to do, if you take a look at it, right, we have 3 knobs and 3 wheels. What do you think those correspond to? Hey, what about a 3-way color corrector? So I'm going to open up my 3-way color corrector. And again, I'm going to kind of take a step away from the computer so you don't see me doing this on the computer. And I'm going to simply adjust my contrast. Let me go back to my video scopes, put that back into a float mode. There we go, so I see things a little better. And I'm simply going to adjust my black level down a little bit, adjust my white level up just a little bit, and then maybe I'm going to cool this shot off just a touch. And you can see as I made those adjustments, right on the 3-way color corrector here on the Lumetri color panel, those particular wheels started moving, okay? This allows you to be extremely fast, focus on your images without ever having to touch the actual controls itself. And if you want more full features, well, just get a bigger control surface with more knobs and more dials. So that's pretty cool as well. Now, not only does this control color wheels, this controls other functions of the Lumetri color panel too. So for example, if I come down to my vignette section, let me open that. I could use my knobs here to adjust the amount of vignette. There we go, Mom, see, no hands. I'm just operating the control surface. I could do things like adjust the roundness, and then of course, the feather as well to quickly build in a static vignette if you were going to use a static vignette in your project. That's pretty cool, right? Allows you to work way faster and for a really affordable price point, which is awesome. Okay, moving right along, I want to get to kind of the marquee feature I think that's in this release that is really a pretty exciting thing. So on this shot, do you remember I said earlier, I had that client that gave me the comment in Frame.io that said, hey, look, I don't want this woman with this green bandana. I'd like it to be red or whatever, right? Well, in the past, to do that, I would be a little challenged here in the Lumetri color panel. Yeah, I guess I could do a mask over on the effects controls panel and draw kind of a detailed mask around the bandana, and then I could track it. But, you know, that's a lot of steps, right? Drawing the mask, tracking the mask, then going back and making changes. Right? You know, I'm all about speed. I don't want to do that. So instead, what I can do now is I can actually use the HSL secondary section of the Lumetri color panel, which we find right here. Seems pretty complicated. It's not. I'll walk you through it in just a second. Now, one little pro tip is that before you do any secondary work, you want to do primary color corrections. You guys have probably heard that phrase before, right? You know what it means? It means make overall adjustments first. Contrast, overall color corrections. Because as you start doing detailed secondary work, you potentially change tonality of your image. So before I jump into the HSL secondary section, what I'm going to do is open up the basic correction section. And I think I'm just going to bump up the exposure just a little bit on the shot. Probably bring my blacks down just a little bit. There we go. And then maybe just saturate her just a touch more. All right. So I think that looks a little better. Yeah, she's certainly brighter. That works just fine. Now I'm going to come into the HSL secondary section. All right. So here's how this works. At the very top of the section, we have 3 eyedroppers. You can first choose a color that you want to select, right? Because remember, a key is a couple-step process. It's one, selecting what you want to target, and then it's refining what you want to target, and then it's finally making the correction. So with these 3 eyedropper tools, I can simply go in and select different parts of the image based on HSL values, hue, saturation, or lightness, or luminance, right? If you know that there's a standard color that you want to select, you could use these presets right here for red, green, yellow, and so on, right? The primary and secondary colors. But what I'm going to do is use the eyedropper. So I'm going to click my set color eyedropper. I'm going to come over to the shot and drag on her headband right there. Looks like nothing happened, right? Well, something did happen. Remember, the first step in using the HSL secondary is to simply make a selection itself. Now, I have a couple things that I want to show you about this. You might have noticed when I made that selection, down below the little eyedropper tools right here, these 3 little strips, these are called qualifiers. They became active, right? These controls allow me to adjust the range and softness or fall off at that particular qualifier. So for hue, saturation, and lightness. So the way this works is this little top little round triangle, that affects your range of that particular selection. So in this case, hue range. And then the bottom little triangle down here, well, that affects your softness or your fall off of that portion or that selection. Okay, so here's what's kind of cool and kind of unique actually to the Premiere Pro implementation of this versus other keyers, is that the second that you go to grab one of these qualifiers, check out what happens. I'll grab this qualifier and start moving. And instantly, I go into this kind of black and white matte view. Have anybody ever seen a matte before? Anybody ever done any keying, right? Okay, now, here's the thing, is that you might want to be able to see that matte all the time. Well, you can right down here with this little checkbox, and you have a couple different ways of viewing the matte, on gray, on black, or white on black, which is more of a traditional view. So if I turn that on, I can get a full-time view of what I've selected in the shot. Now, for those of you who are VFX people, MoGraph people, and you're used to creating perfect keys, don't stress. The real world in terms of color is not, well, perfect, okay? So when it comes to color correction keys, don't worry if you have a little bit of a small little tiny hole in the matte or something like that. It's not going to kill the overall creative work. But I do want to refine this just a touch. I'm going to come in and expand my saturation range just a little bit. There we go. And probably my luma range just a little bit, just to fill in a little bit more. And I think I'm going to do a little softness on fall off on all of these. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. All right. Okay, so now I got my selection. Here's the one thing you must do. I don't want you to come follow me around the show floor and tell me that later on you had a problem with this, because I'm going to tell you what I mean. Make sure always, always, always that you denoise your selection just a little bit. Otherwise, those little tiny little holes that you might have in the mat, they might kind of look like mosquito noise and jitter a little bit, right? So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of denoise on this. And again, when I do that, the image goes back to my matte view. Let me tweak this just a little bit more. Yeah, that's good. All right, I'm liking that. Yep. And then I'm going to blur the edges just a touch as well. OK, so now I've made my selection. What do you think the third and final step of this is? I've refined the selection. Let's actually make the correction, right? All right, so to do that, I'm going to come down and come to my color wheels here. And one of the cool things that Adobe did in these color wheels is that they actually gave you 2 ways of working, or really 3 ways of working. I have a single color wheel, which is really just a midtones color wheel. And then I have, if I want, I can switch this over to a traditional 3-way color wheel, right? So you have your way of working. And then the third way down here, of course, is temperature, tint, and some of those more basic controls. So for example, if I go ahead and drag over to, I don't know, pinky red over here, right? There we go. Let's make that nice and pink and red. You can see very quickly I'm able to change her bandana maybe from peach to yellow to pink to whatever I want. If I wanted to add a little more saturation there, yeah, no problem. There's some more saturation. I made that seem slow because I was explaining it, but in your own projects, this is mega fast. It's very easy to select, refine, and then make an additional correction. And this is a really welcomed addition to the Lumetri tool set for full-fledged color correction work that you might need to do here in Premiere. All right, one more thing I want to show you on the Lumetri Color panel is a little bit more about some of the creative effects that Jason, who preceded me, was talking a little bit about. Here in the creative section, we've had the ability for a long time to apply a lookup table or a creative LUT. And this allows you to really quickly stylize your shot. Now, this shot is already pretty stylized, obviously. It's this woman outside with this sparkler. And I've already done a basic primary correction on it. I've just kind of lifted it up. But my client, again, over in Frame.io, said to me, yeah, no, it's kind of boring. Is there something more you can do? Sure, there's always something more I can do. What I'm going to do on this shot is I'm actually going to come into my creative section right up here. And I'm going to click into the look pull down. And there are just a ton of different looks. And we have some great new looks from the guys at Speed Looks. And I'm going to go ahead and choose one of those, Clean Fuji B. And right away, you can see that it applied a little bit more of a contrast to the shot. It saturated things up. But I want to go a little further with it. First thing I'm going to do is intensify it a little bit. I want a little bit more of that look. All right, so maybe not that much, probably about that much. Next thing I'm going to do is come down to the faded film section and lift that, because I want to kind of get a little bit of a printy, kind of flat, Instagram-y type look to it. So that's no problem. And then down here in the shadows, I'm going to tint those nice and blue and go the other way with my highlight tint. There we go. And then I'm going to tint balance that just a little bit so she's nice and glowy warm from that correction. And real quick, it might not be your cup of tea, but I got definitely a cool stylized look that I can continue to refine with my client. All right, I got one last thing to show you. I have a sequence here that I graded. I graded here in Premiere Pro. This was for the DC Arts Festival, or DC Arts Commission. And this is a kind of fun little piece, very stylized, all done here inside of Premiere Pro with the Lumetri Color panel. I'll just play for a second of it too for you. All right, so you get the idea. It's kind of a fun piece, right? So now I'm ready to get this to my client to take a look. Now, how many of you in the past have taken a file, exported a master file, opened up Media Encoder, made an H.264 file, then went over to Vimeo, and then uploaded to Vimeo and set permissions, and like next thing you know, you've done 27 steps and a half an hour's gone by just to get your client that file, right? This is where I'm most excited about some of the ecosystem stuff that's happening with Premiere Pro with third-party panels like Whipster and Frame.io and others, right? So what I can actually do in a tool like Frame.io is I can actually just come into my account directly from within Premiere Pro, right? I can click the upload button right here, and guess what I can do? I can upload my active sequence. I can even upload my project file so I have a cloud backup of the project if I want. When this uploads, my client will be automatically notified. They can jump into their Frame.io account, make comments, and guess what happens on the back end? Those comments sync here. I can bring them into a timeline. I can work with them. And that is true collaboration that only Premiere Pro and some of these third-party extensions are really allowing for, which is just awesome. So I want to wrap up with one last thing just to tell you, and that is that I run a website called mixinglight.com. If you're interested in color, and we are passionate about color no matter the platform, I encourage you to check out Mixing Light because we cover Premiere Pro, SpeedGrade, and everything having to do with color no matter the platform. So, thank you for listening. I'm Robbie Carmen, and enjoy the rest of the show.